Hi again, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast, episode 145, breaking down the swing of St. Louis Cardinals all-star first baseman Paul Goldschmidt, Mechanical Breakdown Series Volume 2. So let me bring in professional evaluator, successful business owner, my former coach, current day renowned coach, friend and co-host, Jake Epstein.
Howdy, howdy. Ready to do this, Jimmy?
I'm ready. Cardinals first baseman Paul Goldschmidt is the centerpiece of today's show. Last week, Ep, you mentioned how the timing is on point in breaking down Goldschmidt because, what was it, in 2021, you said if we would have done this 2 years ago, then some of the things that he was doing in his swing you wouldn't have been as receptive to, but now, a couple of years later in 2023, which, by the way, last year hit over 300, this year hitting close to 300 on base is relatively high. OPS is relatively high. So what are some of the things? Let's just go right into this because you mentioned last week. What are some of the things that you didn't like in his swing from a couple of years ago that you like now and that we're going to touch on today?
You know, I don't know if there's really a big difference. He struggled a lot. I think it was 2 years ago. And then it really struggled in the playoffs a lot a couple of years ago. And he's funky. Like he doesn't line up with most major league hitters. Like this guy is special in terms of strength, athleticism, vision, and adjustability. He's a guy that I'm going to show you too. So I went through like probably 10 or so hits, and 8 of them were home runs that I found online over the past few months, right, of the season. He is all over the place. Like he's hitting, he hits breaking balls really well. He hits breaking balls down really well. And we'll be able to look at that. He also can kind of adjust to higher fastballs somehow, which is amazing, whether maybe he anticipates them, but it's not something on a fly that we usually do where we can handle 96 and then be able to handle like 84 down in the zone. So I don't know if he's like a prolific anticipator. If he's a big play, he probably is really smart, like Manny Ramirez and Bonds were smart and pitches to look for. But, you wouldn't really teach this swing to a 10-year-old, to an 11-year-old. Like he kind of bars his arm. He stands really far away from the plate. He'll pull balls that are outside, even though he's super far away from the plate. He does some things really well. He's got great hands, and they're very quiet through contact. Like he's not flippy. His forearms are good. Elbows are good, that kind of stuff. But it's not something like, okay, Junior, you want to learn how to play baseball. Like we're going to build a swing from scratch. This is a guy's swing. This is like Lee Trevino as a golfer, or Arnold Palmer as a golfer, like taught themselves, found a way to, hit the middle of the club face all the time and work the ball different ways. And that's kind of what Goldie looks like. He finds barrels. And he finds barrels from really different positions in the swing, which is kind of fun. So we'll get to look at that today.
Yeah, and again, reminder, this episode, like all of our mechanical breakdowns, best enjoyed by checking out the YouTube page, watching the show on YouTube, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page. All right, moving forward, last week on cross-functionality, Cassie Riley-Bosch and I, we debunked some hitting misconceptions that have been developed over the years, past and present. And the one point that we touched on, Ep, is technology and how technology now has really been able to debunk a lot of those past myths and now the present day misconceptions as well. And coaches now have the ability, with applicable evidence based off that technology, to debunk those myths, to debunk those misconceptions, and to teach players the correct way to actually hit and kind of filter out those past misconceptions.
Yeah, it's always in the eyes of the beholder. It's always how that coach is using that technology. I watched Albert Pujols do a demo on MLB Network where he took the knob straight down to the ball. Albert Pujols never looked like that, ever. He was never in that position in real life in a swing. Like you could look at thousands of videos of his hits, 3,000 of them. Right? I mean, you could look at every one of his hits, and not one position would look like he looked while demonstrating. But that's what he thought. So that's what worked for him. So you're right. You have to be careful. You can say this is the perfect path that we want to build, and this path and these moves by video evidence is kind of how it started. At least with me in the early 2000s, it was like I used video to kind of watch everyone and how did it work, and then you get some sensors, and then you get kinematic sequencing sensors to see how the body moves in relation to the bat, and you have all these things, but it's also like, well, how do you get there? What is the path to get there? So, for instance, you get the guy that wants you to snap the barrel back and launch your swing on one leg, right? Like, if you were to look at that and be like, and look at sensors, right, kinematic sequencing, you'd be like, well, that doesn't work on the kinematic sequencing says that that's not wrong. You have to, whatever, have both feet on the ground and yada yada. But maybe those moves work in teaching a player to actually do it right, even though it's kind of weird when you just see it. Or if you have somebody that says, I want you to swing straight down to the ball. Well, we know that nobody really swings straight down to the ball. I mean, sometimes I saw Hank Aaron his barrel was above the ball right before contact, and then it was right below the ball or the plane after contact. I'm like, okay, like he swung down maybe a little bit, or maybe he was level to the ground. But if you put a sensor on, it's like, well, you got to be 5 to 15 degrees, right? You want to be 10 degrees up for most of the time. So again, technology is great, tools are great, but if you don't have a brain, maybe AI will just take over and teach everybody how to hit. But if you don't have a brain and you don't know how to use that technology to get a player to change, whether it's up, down, in, out, left, right, whatever it is, then it doesn't matter. Like, for instance, like Blast. I like Blast. I use Blast. I don't use it a ton because there's a lot of variables that kind of go into what you can look at and where the pitch is and where contact was made or whatnot. But Blast marketed their product to Bill. There's no 11-year-olds named Bill. Who am I kidding? To Tanner, the 11-year-old kid and the dad, and to say, you put this knob on there, and if you swing and it's in the green zone, then you did it right. But you can't use that device like that. It doesn't work. The pitch is moving. The ball is moving.
So they marketed, basically, and a lot of these other companies marketed their technology to parents who don't know any better.
Right.
Where they didn't exactly market the technology to coaches who use it, but coaches who know how to use it.
Right. Well, that wouldn't be the best marketing tool anyway. I mean, you can try to do that, but really,
no, I'm not. Hey, look, again, this is a capitalistic society, so
yeah, right.
I'm all for. It's not a bait and switch.
Maybe there's like 10,000. There's 10,000 coaches they can reach, and there's 500,000 players they can reach. Like,
right.
They probably did the right business thing, but putting that sensor on and listening for a beep and trying to get in range of these different numbers, like, I can guarantee you, I've tried to use that device in a team setting where, these people buy it and I get to see all the different readings, but it doesn't change anyone. Like, you need to have somebody that knows how to coach you, and sometimes that's your parents too. I'm telling you, I got a couple hundred online members, and it's me and it's dad who may have never played before, or mom and the kid, and we make huge progress mechanically. But why do we do that? Not because we have this app that allows us to do it. It's because we're all working together, right? We're all working together to help that kid, and that kid's doing the drills, but he's doing the drills the right way. He's not just, depending on technology. And then the technology, I mean, the Blast is cheap, $150, right? But it's not like every kid's going to have a Rapsodo device for $5,000, a HitTrax for $20,000, a K-Vest for, $8,000. Yeah, that's not really possible. So, again, it's, technology is awesome, and it proves points, and it makes players kind of understand how to get better, and you can chart that progress. But again, you have to have a plan. You have to have somebody put together some kind of plan so that you can improve.
Well, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, what it takes to be a successful coach in 2023. Technology was certainly part of that. So go ahead back in the archives and take a listen. Coming up later in the year, speaking of topics, by the way, we're going to have some good ones coming up here in 2023. We'll be breaking down the swing of Yordan Alvarez, another mechanical breakdown. How to be your own hitting coach. That's a good one. Talking about hitting technique, hitting, and the Major League Baseball first-year player draft, which is coming up. In fact, that's our next episode in the next 2 weeks. So, again, great topics coming up here in 2023. So stick with us throughout the year for that. All right. Last week we touched on the pitch clock too. I want to just talk about this really quick. We'll make it very, very quick here. How teams, hitters have been struggling to make real adjustments with that pitch clock this year. And I have a quote here. I was reading a story from ESPN.com this week talking about pitch clock and the new rules. Elvis Andrus, a veteran, has said this, quote, timing in regards to the pitch clock. Timing. The game is so fast. I know for younger guys, it's exciting. They like it. But for me, I love thinking, especially during an at-bat. Yeah. Last thing you want to be is rushed. The clock rushes you a lot. You have to get used to it and anticipate it. So he's not saying that he hates the pitch clock, but he's not saying that it was easy to adjust to the pitch clock. We talked about it last week with Juan Soto struggling a bit with the pitch clock. Older veteran guys who a lot of times were always in control of their plate appearances, and that's what's made them successful. But now, the playing field, in terms of at least the mental game, was evened out a little bit with the pitcher and the hitter with that new pitch clock implemented, and hitters have had to kind of speed up their mind a little bit, and they're not as in control, or at least they weren't as in control with their plate appearances as they were in previous years. A lot of guys, most guys at this point at the major league level, have adjusted and caught up. But obviously Elvis Andrus was talking about what I said last week with some of these hitters that have been struggling with the pitch clock. It has to do with the fact that the game is sped up in their mind.
I mean, I get it. Like, you're late in the game and people are screaming and you just want to take a moment, right? To clear your brain, to step out of the box, take a big breath. God forbid we take a deep breath. And, okay, what's this guy trying to do? The first 2 pitches were in. Okay. This is a game of thinking. This is not, we're just going to line up and run into each other, right? We're creating strategy as a player. You have coaches. It's not like football where they're calling plays for you and then you have to go out there and perform that play. I mean, you're anticipating what the defense is doing while you're in the batter's box, essentially. So I get it. I don't think anybody knows what the right process is. I think maybe giving the hitter a few more seconds to get back in. What do they have to make eye contact with the pitcher with 8 seconds left?
Yeah.
Like, how about they have to make eye contact with the pitcher with 4 seconds left? Like, what does he need? 8 seconds. Then the pitcher could just stand there for 8 seconds before he goes into his windup. Yeah.
How about just be in the box by 8 seconds
or in the box? Yeah, you're in the box or whatever. But I just feel like there are
the eye contact being stupid
in the game when, look, if we do 7 innings of this stuff, but in the 8th and 9th inning, like, maybe we extend it, right? Another 5 seconds. Maybe because most of the time everyone's getting ready, they're getting into a rhythm. But when you do need those extra few seconds to reset and get your heart rate to slow down a little bit, it'd be nice to have them and then not have strike 3 called on you before you get out of the box.
I always said it should absolutely depend on the situation. If it's a game that's 11-2 in the 8th inning, the umpire should say, hey, we're really enforcing the rules. If it's a 2-2, 3-2 type game, then you have to be a little bit more lenient. I also don't agree with the new rule that you can only throw over so many times. I think that absolutely gives the advantage. There is unquestionably no doubt that it gives the advantage to the running team. I understand you want to get more stolen bases, but the bags are bigger now. I think the whole idea of trying to control the run game or produce more stolen bases, to me, is sort of messing with the core of the game. But again, what do I know?
Yeah.
I'm for the game being quicker. I like the pitch clock in certain instances, but I think the rules have to be changed a little bit, tweaked in the off season that better formats the actual core of the baseball game.
Yeah.
Right. That's the point of the new rules. I mean, football, when they implement new rules, they're not messing with the actual core of the game. They're not going to stretch the first down marker to 1st and 12, 1st and 15, it's 1st and 10. That's what it is. That's the core of the game. And I think that baseball, in some instances with these new rules, they've sort of stretched the core of what the actual game is. And players have struggled, both hitters and pitchers, by the way, I've noticed, have struggled to kind of adjust. So we'll see what happens in the future. But
we'll see what I think. It's a work in progress, but I definitely think it's sped things up. I mean, sometimes it drives me crazy when someone's sitting there taking off their batting gloves and, like, it gets a little bit crazy and extreme. But if you're just sitting out and taking a breath, because the game's on the line and then there's runners at 2nd and 3rd and there's 2 outs and you got a couple strikes on you. Yeah. Have a little feel, but I think you do have to draw a line, because then what's the other coach in that I got going to say, hey, the pitch clock ran out. Why didn't you call it? Right? That should have been strike 3, and then you have a different argument.
Yeah.
Albeit a lame one.
That's right. That's right. I'll tell you, these younger umpires, though, now across Major League Baseball, they love calling these pitch clock violations. I understand they have a sensor on their wrist that tells them, hey, pitch clock violation, but they jump right out, take that mask off, and they signal, hey, pitch clock. They love it.
Yeah, they also like overturning plays at home plate. Man,
they do.
Yeah, actually, the on-field umpires are calling it great. It's the review guys that are in the booth in New York that are nitpicking everything in slow motion instead of real time, and that's a mess now too. That cost the Rangers a game. I don't know if it cost. Was it in the San Diego game? Same thing happened. I don't know if that cost them the game if that run, but the one in Texas was pretty bad. Like that was the go-ahead run in the 8th inning or something.
Yeah. All right, well, moving on here, let's get into Paul Goldschmidt. You ready to go with the mechanical breakdown? A couple of things that I noticed about him. He's got a good swing plane, a little bit steep, stays on plane, though, for a long time. I would love to know what his attack angle is. That's the first point with Paul Goldschmidt.
Mm-hmm.
For 2, and this is a misconception coaches might point to and use Paul Goldschmidt as an example if they're in the camp of, hey, get your foot down early. Paul Goldschmidt does get his foot down early, but he's still able to get into that back hip, into that back glute, and gain the proper torque that he needs to get the power that he's able to generate. So let's talk about those 2 things first, his swing plane, and then let's break and bust that myth of how he gets the foot down, quote unquote, gets the foot down early.
Okay, so here's a view of Goldie from the front, and the one on the right, Jim, you had mentioned, I wonder what his attack angle is. This one here in the blue, you can see he hits super deep in the zone. This was only a 6-degree attack angle. So they had one of the bat tracers on that. And then this one on the left was an off-speed pitch. I believe it was like a hanging slider at around 80-something miles an hour. And you can see he swung up more. I believe this one was, I don't know, but this was probably closer to 12 or 15 degrees. So now, one he hit deep in the zone, one he hit out in front of the zone. So that's why I always, when I'm working with players, we're trying to get our attack angle somewhere in the 5 to 15. 5 if we're late, 15 if we're early. It's never the same. You can't be like 5 the whole way through, right? It's always kind of working up to your follow through. So if we just take a look here, we can see he's really far away from the plate. Like, where do you stand from the plate? Here's the inside corner. I mean, I don't know how many amateur players I work with. There's a lot more out there than I work with that stand almost on the white batter's box line, right? The plate's 17 inches, so there's 17 inches there. He's like 22 inches away from the plate. That's really far. So where are his hands when he hits every single pitch? They're pretty far away from the plate, right? His hands are not in front of his body at all on either of these swings. I mean, you would kind of expect that on an outside pitch, but on a pitch down the middle, which both of these are, he's covering the middle of the zone and his hands are way out away from his body. That's him. And you know what? That's okay. It works for him. So as we go through here, I'm going to just clear some of these marks. Okay. I got to zoom back in. So if we look at this one on the left, we're going to be able to see him from the side here in a second. Okay, so he's going to run around the bases. Everybody loves running around the bases. Isn't that fun? Okay, and then I'm going to center him. So as Jim mentioned, he is a guy that strides early to his toe. So let's, if we look here, well, unfortunately we didn't have a long enough clip, but he steps early and then he stops. And then he just drops his front heel. And as he drops his heel, watch his hands. Again, we're looking on the left side here. Watch his hands. His back knee starts to go, but look at his front arm. Okay, so if I were seeing this, there might be less than, 3% of Major League Baseball players that have a front arm that smashes against the chest. Okay? Again, that's right up against his chest. This would be considered kind of an arm bar. An arm bar is not bad if it's back here, okay? But if you start to rotate and then the bicep smashes against your chest, that's not a good move. He gets away with it. Like, he is a special guy. And then as he continues forward, now he's trying to make up space and get his hands there. Okay, he's trying to get his hands back out in front, but he's fighting it. And notice how straight his front arm is. So, most people would see that and be like, oh, that's not a good. He does it on every swing. Okay, why do you think he stands so far away from the plate? Because he's not good at keeping his hands close to his body. This move here with his left arm pushes his hands away from his body. So what does he do? He stands a little bit further from the plate. Okay, job well done, Mr. Goldschmidt. I'm trying to remember Ted Williams broke his, I believe it was his right arm, so his lead arm. Ted Williams broke his lead arm in the All-Star game. I think it was the All-Star game 1951, 50, something like that. I don't know. He ran into the fence, broke his arm, and when he got back, he said he started, after he was done with rehab, he started pulling everything foul because he was straightening his front arm more than he did earlier in his career before he broke his arm. So what did he do? He moved off the plate and closed his stance a little bit, and then he was able to keep the pitch fair. Okay, that's what he figured out to do. And Goldie kind of has that same move, so he's just a little bit farther away from the plate. If you look at this home run he hit, yes, it was an off-speed pitch. Look how early he was. I mean, he hits this ball way out in front of his front. Look how far in front of his hands the barrel is. Okay? But notice how there's zero wrist roll going on. See how quiet his hands are as he finishes. See how his forearms stay quiet. He doesn't turn his right forearm over his left forearm. I mean, he's borderline fooled. If you were to see this swing, you're like, oh, he was fooled on that? I saw 3 swings that looked exactly like this. Every breaking ball he hits is down in the zone. It's slow, and he's able to hit it, at his front foot. If we try to put an attack angle on this, again, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm going through his barrel here. Maybe from there to there, he's probably swinging it, 13 to 15 degrees up on this breaking pitch. Where if we look here on the right in the blue jersey, watch as he comes through. Notice how late he is, but he delivers the barrel to the inside, and then he shoots that home run. This was like straight away right field. So he was totally late, but notice how his barrel never got underneath this. I don't know if you guys follow me on Twitter, right, at Epstein Hitting, but I did a video. There was a kid from Florida that was from Tennessee that was swinging under a lot of fastballs. And in this position here, his barrel was like this. It was way down here, and then as he came through, he tried to flip his barrel back up. Where if you see Goldie, if I draw this line, this is his vertical bat angle. Well, should be able to put a number on that. Okay, his vertical, we know his attack angle was 6. His vertical bat angle was 23. But notice how his barrel, kind of comes on that same line as I rewind him. See how his barrel's just barely underneath that? And then as he finishes, see how his barrel stays kind of right on that line? That's the key. That's the key because he can hit it there, or if he was early, he could have hit it here. But notice how his barrel is still on that same line. Okay? That's a sign of a good hitter. So, what does he do well? He knows what works well for him. He's got to be off the plate because of his lead arm and how straight it is. Okay? No, not a big deal. It's not like he may bar his front arm, but he doesn't cast the bat. The bat stays pretty close to his back shoulder. Okay, this angle, again, if we look, what is casting? We try to keep this angle between his forearm and his bat, right? We try to keep that 90 degrees as long as we can. Okay, that wasn't a very good line I drew, but he's probably about 100 degrees on this pitch. Okay, some guys are even tighter, right? Their bat's like this, and then the forearm is like this. So there's really not a big cast going on, even though he's straightening his front arm. It's just how he does it, right? It's how he does it. So his barrel gets to the plane. More importantly, it's just an adjustable plane. Like sometimes he drops underneath, and sometimes this one on the right. So before, when I was telling you he was struggling in whatever the playoffs of 21, he was like on this pitch that he hits out of the park in the blue uniform, his hands were like up here and his barrel was like underneath it. So he had his hands too high and his bat vertical angle was dropping underneath everything. And that's when he struggled. So he has found a way to get his hands lower essentially and the barrel higher. Okay? And when you do that, when you get your hands a little bit lower and the barrel a little bit higher, the barrel's still below the hands, people. Okay, but it's not as great. Then he has a vertical bat angle in the 20s instead of one in the 40s. And when he's in the 40s, he was swinging under everything, and he was really frustrated, and he wasn't the Goldie that most people remember. So I'm not sure what caused that, or I'm not sure what got him out of that, but he's obviously a very talented hitter that does tend to swing up a little bit more, but not too much. Okay, if he's going to be exploited, he's going to be exploited with fastballs, and he's going to be a little bit late. And that's why I wanted to put this one here in the blue, because when we're late and we have a barrel plane issue, we miss this ball. I mean, he hits it really deep in the zone. We can't really see it from this angle, but I'm telling you, he hits this ball between the right field line and the right fielder. Okay, this was not a high judge fly ball into the bullpen. This was a low line drive into the seats that barely got out because it was hit so low. So when you can let the ball get that deep, travel that deep, and not swing under it, that is the sign of somebody that's going to find a lot of barrels. I work this drill all the time with players. We're going to be late. I usually throw it further outside. We throw it on the outside part of the plate. I tell them they got to make contact behind their front foot, and if they pop it up, they did it wrong. Okay, and that teaches you, notice how he's coming into this pitch, right? In this position, is his barrel above the ball or below the ball? It's above the ball, okay? If we come in one more, where's his barrel? Slightly above the ball, okay? And then right at contact, boom, it gets to the ball, to the bottom half of the ball. And that's how you find a lot of barrels and hit above 300 in the major leagues. Really, really important.
All right, well, be sure to follow us on social media at Jim Tara, at Epstein Hitting. Email us your questions, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. In a couple of weeks, we'll be discussing hitters and preparing for the Major League Baseball draft, how offensive players can do such, so stay tuned for that. We will talk to you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for listening and watching, and we will talk to you in just a couple of weeks. Have a great July 4th. Happy birthday, America. Take care.